this CAD and 3D printing class. I hope everyone had a good Christmas break and are looking forward to New Year's coming up. But here we're ready to learn about CAD. And I just want to pick off where we left off yesterday, or last week, I guess. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And let me do this. Okay, so as always, just a reminder, feel free to unmute at any time if you have a question or put something in the chat. I'll be looking at it. And I really don't want you falling behind because it can be hard to catch back up. But I have no problem slowing down if people think I'm going too fast or need a review or you just weren't sure what I did. But here we're back at 3D drafting and 3D printing. And today's class, the goal for this class is we're going to work on a project together. There's a couple options. There's a phone stand and house, do nothing machine, and bike pedals. And I'll show you what they look like. The first two are what I want to do first. And if we have time, maybe we can look at some of the more complex, the do nothing machine and bike pedals. And if we don't have time, so continue working on this next week. But for this project, we want to just develop some more CAD skills and review some of the stuff that we learned last week, because I know might have been a week and some of it you forgot. So we're going to review extruding, a little bit of revolving, and just CADing in general. And then we're also going to learn a couple of new tools, specifically Boolean logic with objects and also sweep and loft operations, which I'll show soon. But here are just what some of these projects look like. They're just simple CAD projects to just practice your skills, because at this point, that's the most important thing. It's just finding something you want to do and creating it in CAD. So here we have the phone stand, and then we have a house. This is a do nothing machine where you can turn the crank and it does nothing, but it just turns around. And then we have bike paddles. It's not really a bike, but you can imagine it has like pedals, and that's the gear that will power the bike. So I think the best thing to start with is just the house, because it's a little bit on the simpler side, but we'll also have a lot more, we'll learn a lot by doing it. But I guess if anyone has a really strong preference on maybe what we want to do today, feel free to speak up. But actually, before we start on this, there are just a couple more things I want to talk about, just so we're a little bit better prepared and it'll go a lot bit smoother. So if everyone can open up Onshape on their computer, and if you don't remember the URL, it's CAD, C-A-D, .onshape.com. And I'll also put that in the chat for everyone. So cad.onshape.com. So if you could go to that link and log in with the account that you created from last week, you should go to your document home where you see all your projects so far. And so last week I told you to make a folder. And so I have this AOE folder right here, and you can see this is the file that we worked with from last week with our basic shapes. I'm going to create a new document. So again, top left, create document. So this is like a CAD file. And I'll call this class 2 project or something. You can name it whatever you want for your own sake. It's just for organization. But once we do that, we should be at the screen. And so I'll pause a little bit, wait for everyone to get here. And again, since it's hard for me to judge where everyone is at, if you are at the screen and everything's gone well so far, if you could raise your hand in the participants list. So at the bottom, you have participants, should be one of your buttons. And then you can click raise hand, just so I can make sure I can move forward without leaving people behind. I think also just as how to make this class go a little bit smoother, I'm gonna be showing you some of the tools on Onshape just like last week. And then we're gonna start a project. But at any time, if you are confused, it doesn't look right, you can speak up or chat, and then I'll probably have you share your screen. So yeah, I will have you share your screen and we can take a look at it together. Okay. So looks like most of you are on the screen, ready to start. I guess Alexander, Jeffrey, Josephine, are you having trouble or did you just forget to raise your hand? Okay. Or I think Peyton, yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're almost, everyone's ready. Cool. Alexander, oh, okay. So Alexander, I'm guessing you're ready, but your hand isn't up. Or are you having trouble? Okay, no problem. So if everyone wants to clear their hand, thank you for doing that, just so I can keep track of where everyone's at. But this should look familiar. This is what we were playing around with last week. We have, whenever we start our document, we just have our three kind of coordinate planes, our top plane, front plane, and right plane. And so what I want to do before we start the project is just go over some 2D sketch tools that I didn't have time to talk about last week. So just as a review, starting off, we want to create a sketch, right? We want to create a 2D sketch. Right now we're in 3D view. If you look at the top toolbar, here are all of our 3D tools. We have extrude, revolve. These are some of the things we talked before. But we want our 2D tools. We want to draw rectangles. We want to draw circles. And so how do we do that? If you remember, we have the sketch button in our top left. And I just want to create a sketch somewhere. I'll choose the top plane. And I hit the sketch button. I hit the top plane. And now you can see my toolbar has changed. Now I don't have my 3D tools anymore. I have my 2D drawing tools. And just to make my view a little bit better, I can use the cube in the top right corner. I can click the top face to move it so I'm looking straight down on the sketch. Or if you remember, you can right click and the last option says view normal to sketch plane. That button will also bring you to this view. So again, just with a little bit of, I guess, review for now, I'm just going to draw a simple rectangle on my screen. So to do that, I'm going to use a corner rectangle. So I'm going to define 2 corners, and that is my rectangle. That's the default. So I can click this rectangle looking button on my toolbar. And then I go here. For now, I'm going to just click anywhere on my screen that's not the center point. So I'm going to stay away from that. I'm just going to click somewhere on my screen. That's one corner of my rectangle. I move my mouse around and I don't know, right here, looks good. So I clicked again and I chose my second corner. And so right now, this is the rectangle I have. I'm gonna set the dimensions to this because I want it to be, let's say, a 3" by 5". It's like a note card. So to do that, I have this dimension tool on my toolbar. You can also hit D on your keyboard, and this brings you to the dimension tool. We click the edge that we want to dimension, and then it brings up the number that we can put in. So here, I want to make a 3 by 5 rectangle. And so this is, at this point, this should all be review. Right? We did something similar last class where we made a cube. And so in that case, we made a rectangle, but then the sides were the same length. Here, I just chose random numbers. You don't have to do 3.3 by 5. You can do whatever you want. What I just want to talk about now is the importance of black lines and blue lines in Onshape. So if you notice, if you followed what I have done, all your lines for this rectangle should be blue. All your corners should also be blue, these corner points. What blue means in Onshape is that these are not fixed in position. It means that they can move around. And typically, you do not want blue lines. You do not want blue points. Because when you're designing something, you don't want to leave a variable up to chance, right? You want everything to be defined, everything to be fixed. And so right now, we don't have that, right? To show it, I can, when my mouse is over an edge and it's orange, I can click and I can drag it around. You can see like the position of my rectangle is not well defined at all. I can click a different edge. I can drag this up and down, right? What this means is nothing is defined. Right now, only the size of the rectangle is defined. So I can't make the rectangle any bigger, but I can move it around my screen. And for example, I don't want that, right? That does not seem good to me, right? I can just click a corner, I can drag it around. And so I want to talk about constraints in Onshape and just in CAD. Constraints are exactly what they sound like. They add a constraint to your sketch and make sure it follows a set of rules. And the way to add constraints in Onshape is that on your very right of your toolbar, for me, by default, it's kind of collapsed, but maybe if you're on a bigger screen or if you have, it's a little bit different, you might have a lot more buttons right here. So the first constraint is this coincident constraint, but there's also this arrow for me where you can see all the different constraints that we have. You don't have to worry about most of these. We're just gonna deal with a little. But they basically just define rules that our sketch has to follow. So you can see there's like a parallel constraint that makes sure two lines are parallel to each other. There's a tangent constraint, which means you click a circle, you click a line, and they have to be tangent now. It's a rule. So with these constraints, I want to make my rectangle all black instead of blue. I want to fix everything. And so one way I can do that very easily is maybe I want this coincident constraint, which means that this constraint makes two things at the same location, right? So when we're just starting out with a blank document, the only set point in our whole document is the origin point, the special circle, the special dot right in the middle. This is our only well-defined position in our whole document. So I'm just going to use that to define our rectangle. I'm going to say my bottom left corner of my rectangle has to be coincident with the origin. And so how I do that is I click the corner. So it's highlighted now. You can see it's kind of outlined in orange. I'm going to click this constraint. And then I'm going to click the origin point. Right? And once I do that, you can see the rectangle moves and all my lines have now turned black. Right? And so I'll just go over that really quickly again. I'm going to undo my changes. So here is the rectangle I started out with. I can drag it around as much as I want. All my lines are blue. Right? I want to fix this rectangle's position. I want to make sure it can't move around. To do that, I want to add a constraint. And the constraint I wanted was this coincident constraint, which means two things have to be the same place. In this case, I'm going to put 2 points. I'm going to say, it's a rule. You have to be in the same position. You can't move around. You have to stay together. And so what I did is I selected my first point, this one, my bottom left corner. I clicked this tool in my toolbar, and then I clicked the other point, the origin. And once I did that, once I clicked, it moved my rectangle so that the 2 points are now on top of each other. And you can see everything's black. I can no longer drag around anything, right? It doesn't let me because everything has been fixed. if I were able to move around stuff, then that would break the rules of my sketch, right? We can explore a couple more rules. So for example, I'm gonna create a circle, right? So I have my rectangle, this should be fixed. I'm gonna create a circle on my screen. So the way I do that, I'm gonna use a center point circle. That's the default if you just click this circle looking button next to your rectangle. And once again, I'm gonna start it off with just any random position on my screen. I'm gonna draw it away from my rectangle and the origin, just so I know that it doesn't automatically set up some constraints. Right? So I'm gonna draw a random circle. I want to set the circle size to, let's say, 2 inches in diameter. And so to do that, we use the dimension tool again. So you can hit D or you can hit the button in the toolbar. And if you just click on the outside perimeter of the circle, that will let you set the diameter. And you can tell it's the diameter and not the radius because it has that 0 with a slash through it. That symbol means diameter, right? So here I want a diameter of 2 inches, I said. It's kind of arbitrary. If instead you wanted to do radius instead of diameter, the way you do that is with your dimension tool, you can click the center, you can click the edge. Oops, it went away. It's a little bit buggy. Actually, I don't think it likes doing the radius. Yeah. Typically, if you have an arc, it's what might do radius by default. And in that case, the way you can tell is that instead of having this 0 with the slash through it, it will say R, right? So instead of this symbol right here in front of the 2, it'll have a letter R, which means radius instead of diameter. But anyways, I want to fix the circle's location. You can see again, it's blue. It's blue because I can just drag it around wherever I want, right? It's not fixed anywhere. And so I can use a coincident constraint again. I can say the center of the circle must be coincident with the top left corner. And if I do that, you can see it moves the circle there. Everything is now black and it's fixed there. But I want to explore some other constraints, right? I can Control Z to undo that. I want to use the tangent constraint, right? So if you haven't learned this in geometry, what tangent means is it's an arc or a circle and a line. And it means that the line is only touching a single point. It doesn't touch at 2 points. It doesn't touch at 0 points. It touches at exactly 1 point so that they're just touching. And so I want to use this constraint and I want to make my circle tangent to the rectangle. So I can click the circle, I can click the line, and you can see it move the circle so it just touches it. It's now tangent to this edge. But I can do that, but it's still variable because I can no longer move it left and right, but I can still move it up and down, right? You can see that I can move it up and down as much as I want. And it's always going to be tangent because I said that. But I never said about the vertical position. I never constrained that, right? And so you have to always be careful. We added a constraint, but they're still free in some way. And you can see that by it's still blue. And this is just something you should always watch out for in your sketches. There's almost no good reason to have blue lines in your sketch. You should almost always have black lines. I can set the position by maybe putting a dimension. I'll say that from the center of the circle to the corner is going to be 1 inch. And once I do that, oh, that's a little bit of a dumb example, but 3 inches. And so you can see once I set the vertical position, now it's a little bit fixed. So there's a ton more. We will actually use some of these in our project, so I'm not going to talk a lot about them now, but a lot of them do what they sound like, right? So concentric means that if you have 2 circles, it makes sure that their centers are at the same point, right? Parallel is just that the lines are the same slope. They will never intersect or go away from each other. Horizontal, vertical, these just mean that it's a perfectly horizontal or vertical line. Perpendicular means that they meet at a 90-degree angle and it's not changing at all. And finally, equal just means that two line segments must be the same length. Right? There's also a couple useful tools here. There's the midpoint tool. It is a constraint that makes sure that things are touching at their midpoint. I think the other ones you might use, but they're less common and not as, you just won't see them as often and you won't use them as often. I'd say coincident and maybe like tangent is some of the more concentric. These are some of the more useful and you'll use them a lot. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say for now. And I think we're just about ready to move on to the project. But I just want to see if people have questions at this point about what I said, the blue lines, the black lines, these constraints that we added to the sketch. Feel free to unmute or put a message in the chat. Okay. So I don't see any questions. So I'm just gonna move on to the small project that we're gonna do together for today's class. And to go back to the slides, does anyone have a preference on what they want? I think we should start by between either the phone stand or the house, just because they're a bit simpler and we can build up to the other two later if we'd like. But just between these two, the phone stand right here and the house, does anyone have a preference on what they'd like to create in CAD?
Can we try house?
Okay, so house. Yeah, I'd be happy to go through the house. It is a little bit more complex than the phone, and so I think we can learn a little bit more when we're doing it. So just to start, oh, I see Kai wants phone. I think I'm just gonna go over the house for today, and we can see where we're at, if we can get it done today. If we have time, we can look at more. And so we're about ready to start. I will just use the same document I had. I'm gonna just select everything and delete it because this was all just practice. So you can decide to save this and create a new document on Onshape. You can go back to the main menu by clicking the top left corner and creating a new document. For me, I'm just gonna delete this and start with this document. I'm gonna delete my sketch as well. So at this point, we're back to just a blank document. I can go back to my default view. We have nothing. And so we're gonna build up this house from scratch. To do this, we're gonna start with the foundation of the house. We're gonna start with the bottom, and then we're gonna build the walls, put a roof on it, and then put a base for it to stand on. So I'm gonna create a sketch on the top plane, just like how I did before. So again, I click the sketch button in the top left, and then I click the top plane. This creates a sketch for us to draw our shapes on. And I'm gonna move my screen back to normal. So I right click view normal to sketch plane, this last option. Or you can use the cube to manipulate the view. But now we're looking down again and we're ready to start drawing, start CADing. For reasons that will be clear a little bit later, it will be simpler if instead of using a corner rectangle, we're gonna use a center point rectangle. And so we briefly talked about this last week, but the corner rectangle is what we saw already today. It's the default kind of, and you just click 2 points and they define a rectangle like that. But what we want is to make sure that the center point is somewhere fixed and not that the corners are somewhere fixed. And so to do that, we click this arrow next to the rectangle button, and we choose, it's not showing up for me for some reason. There we go. It's the center point rectangle, or if you hit R on your keyboard. And so once we click that, we're in our center point rectangle tool. And I want to make sure that the center of the rectangle is exactly at the origin point, right? This special point that's already on our sketch, right? And so I can make sure that by hovering my mouse over the point, and you can see it starts turning orange. And then there's the small square box around it, if you can see. But once that happens, I can click there, and then I can move my mouse around. And you can see that the center point is fixed, and I just determine where one of the corners is. So you can click anywhere because we're going to set the dimension later. I will just say it's whatever. So I have a rectangle now. And now I want to set it to a certain size. And so I'll say I'm going to put some dimensions on my house here. But what's so good about CAD is that you don't have to follow. You can do whatever size that you want. It will affect like how many windows that we're going to have or where the door is. But really, the world's your oyster. So you can choose any dimension that you want. For me, I'm going to make it, let's say like 3 by 5, the postcard that we had before. If you notice, when I set the dimension of one side, I said that this side is 3 inches. It set these 2 lines as black because that means they cannot move around anymore. However, the other sides is still blue because that means I can drag it around still. They're not set yet. And that's because I haven't set my second dimension. I'll do that now by just clicking the dimension tool and clicking the other side of the rectangle. And I'll put it here and I'll say it's 5 inches, just kind of arbitrarily. But now I have a sort of base, and now I want to put my walls of the house. And so this is the part of CAD that takes a little bit of skill to develop, takes a little bit of practice, but you also always have to keep in mind how your final product is going to look, and also what view are you looking at it right now. So if you remember, the house shape should be familiar to you, but what's important to keep in mind is what is our view right now? Right now, we are like standing above the house, right on top of it, and we're looking straight down. And so we have to think about what the shape are the walls going to make of this house. Are they going to be big rectangles, or are they going to be skinny rectangles? So the answer to that is they're going to be really skinny rectangles because we're not looking at the side of the walls. We're looking straight down on top of the walls. And so the walls aren't going to be that thick, right? They're going to be tall, but we're looking straight down. So we don't see anything about the height of the wall. We only see the thickness of the wall. So to do that, I'm going to switch my rectangle back to corner rectangle. So I click the arrow next to the rectangle and I click corner rectangle. Because I don't want to do center rectangles anymore. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 of my walls to the house. And for now, I'm just going to draw it. And later, we're going to actually extrude it to create the walls. But they're just going to be on either side of this base rectangle that we drew. So I click one of my corners. I hover over it, and it's orange. I click it, and I drag over to the other side. And to make sure that the rectangle is the exact same width or the length as the base, the way I do that is I hover over the other point, and you can see it's orange and there's a square box around it again. Then once I'm there, I'm going to move my mouse straight up. And you should see that there's kind of a dotted yellow line that's going from that point straight up. And you can also see that there's a kind of black vertical line symbol, and that means it's a vertical constraint. It's saying that this point has to be directly vertical above the corner point, right? So you want to make sure that is there so that it's always going to be the same width as my house. Once I do that, the height I'm going to define later, so it can be whatever I want. Oops, I moved away. So Once I do that, you should have something that looks like this. You'll know if you did the constraints right by the fact that both of your vertical lines of this new rectangle are going to be black. The only blue line is the one at the top, right? At this point, I don't want to draw another rectangle, so I'm going to hit escape, or I can deselect my tool. And I want to set the dimension, right? I want to set the height of this rectangle, which is actually the thickness of my walls. I'm going to set it something pretty small. Let's say 0.1, right? Because the walls of my house are not going to be super thick, right? Maybe I can make them a little bit thicker just so it's easier to see. So 0.2 perhaps. And then I'm just going to repeat the process on the other side. I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool. I'm going to click one of the corners, move my mouse over the other corner, and then pull it out. And you should see that there's a vertical black line and that it's constrained. When I click again, you should see that the two vertical lines are black and there's only one blue line. It's the one at the bottom. And to get rid of it, I just have to set the height of this rectangle. I'm going to set it to the same height as the other side of my wall. So that's going to be 0.2 in my case. You can see it calculates a little bit. And now I'm ready with my sketch. And I just want to take a break here. To recap, we drew a center rectangle. And then we drew two other rectangles on either side of it. And these are going to be the walls of the house. And so actually, I guess, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, I'm actually going to stop sharing right now. And I guess if any of you had trouble with it and would like some help, feel free to take the screen sharing at this point. But I also just want to, if no one wants help, I'm still going to call on someone just to show that what they have and just to see how everyone's doing. So I guess, yeah, at this point, if you had any questions about what we did so far, or just our drawing our three rectangles, you can take the screen share and I can try to help you. Oh yeah, you can speak. So Alexander, feel free to unmute if you'd like.
Yeah, since I don't have two monitors and for some reason I can't like change the side length to like you know when you click on the side link and type in like how wide or big or the length of it, I don't know how to do that for some reason. It's like different for me.
Okay. Is it possible to share, or are you, I guess, on a different computer with your CAD?
I guess I can screen share or something.
Yeah, if that is possible, I think that would be the easiest way. And I see, Audrey, you had a question, so I'll get to you after. Okay, so I see your screen now. Okay, so I think you're not in the dimension tool yet. So if you look at your toolbar, you can see the dimension tool is not selected. So you move right a little bit, right there. So if you click it, and now it's blue, it's outlined in blue, and you can select it now. So you can click anywhere to drop the number. And then now you can type. So yeah, I guess you set it to 2 inches, so it's really big right now. And you can zoom out using your scroll. Yeah, so you can see, you set it to 2 inches. In my sketch, I had it 0.2 because, yeah. Oh, and so I guess this is also a good point. You already dimensioned this rectangle. Oh, so don't do anything now. This is something you'll see somewhat often. You see these red lines. And so I haven't talked about red yet, but red just means something's wrong with the sketch and you need to fix it somehow. What happened here is that you already dimensioned it as 2 inches, and then you added another dimension saying it's 0.2 inches. And now Onshape's really confused, right? Like you told it two different things. It can't solve it, is what it's saying. Sketch could not be solved. And so to fix this, all we need to do is delete our old dimension of 2 inches. So I think you already had it selected. If you hit just your delete button on your keyboard, it will get rid of the dimension. And you can see the red lines go away, right? Now it can solve it because there's no conflicting information anymore. You still have blue lines because you never set the size of your center rectangle, the main one. So if you set the dimensions of that, your lines should start turning black. I think you accidentally clicked twice in the wrong. So hit your escape button and then Control Z on your keyboard. Or you can, do you see that gray? Yeah, it went away. So now you can dimension it again. You have to select your tool again, and then just click that edge, and then click somewhere outside, anywhere. And then you can set your dimension to whatever you want. For me, I think it was 3 inches and then 5 inches for the other side. But you can see some of the lines have turned black now because you've set the height of that center rectangle. Okay. Yeah, and now all your lines are black and everything's good. You just have to draw your other rectangle and you should be all cut up. So Audrey, yeah, no problem, Alexander. Audrey, I see you had a question.
My lines, the top and bottom part of it are still blue.
Okay, would you be able to share your screen?
I'm on
right
two
now?
different monitors. Could I join
Okay.
the Zoom on the other one and then leave this one and then share?
Well, can you do that quickly, or
Yeah.
is that going to take a while? Yeah, but if you'd like to do that, I think that would be easiest.
Okay, I don't have Zoom installed on the other one.
It's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again, and maybe you can show me what lines are not. Which of these lines are blue right now?
The let me see. The top of the wall, that one, and then the one under it, and then the
Oh,
same
so
on the other side of it.
okay. So, did you set the height of your center rectangle?
Yeah, I put 0.2 for it.
That's the height of this rectangle, but
Yeah, I did that.
is this what it looks like right now on your screen?
But I have the measurements, I have the measurements of 3 and 5.
Okay.
But that's what it looks like.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard for me to see it, but I guess just on your corner are your points and this vertical line. Are they blue as well? Are the points blue?
The points are blue, but in between the 2 points, that vertical line's black.
Okay. I definitely think something might be wrong with your 3 inches
Yeah.
dimension. So try deleting it.
Okay.
And then, well, so does deleting it make more lines blue?
No, it's the same.
Okay, then just try recreating the dimension on this. So when I hover over it, you can see it only goes there.
It's still blue.
Still blue.
Yeah, I didn't put 2 inches.
Ooh, it's okay. It's a little bit tricky for me because without seeing it, it's a little bit hard. All I can say is maybe let's just try deleting this top rectangle.
Which one?
So let's just, if you just click on it and then hit delete.
I put the top rectangle on, the top of my base was still blue.
Oh, okay. So I think what happened now is then the center of your rectangle is not exactly at your origin point. And so to fix that, you can click So if you go to your center of your sketch, do you see 2 different points?
Kind of.
So if you click one of them and then use the coincident constraint and then click the other, it should make everything go away, or it should make everything black.
Oh yeah, it's gone. Okay, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so no problem. But that's just a good exercise. You should always take a pause whenever you're CADing. Make sure everything's black so that nothing is free to move around. And if it is, just try to figure out why it was the case. In there, the top lines were blue, which meant that this shape can slide up and down. And so what that means is either you didn't dimension everything or the center has not been, your center rectangle has not been defined at the right place. So this is for everyone. It's really helpful to check all your constraints, all your dimensions when things are not blue. But I think at this point, does anyone else have problems getting to these 3 rectangles? If you do, please put something in the chat or unmute because I don't want to move on and leave you behind. But if not, I don't see anything. So I'm just gonna move on, but if something comes up, you can always interrupt me and that's fine. So we're done with our sketch at this point. We'll do more sketches later, but we're done with this. So we can just hit this green check mark with our sketch window to say we're done, right? So once we do that, we look at our toolbar. We're in 2D tools right now. I click check and the toolbar has changed. We're in 3D view now. That's another thing that you should always pay attention to. Are you in a sketch or are you in the 3D view? Because a lot of times you'll be looking for a tool that doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is because you're not in the right view. But we're in the 3D view now, and you can move around and you can see all we have at this point is just a flat sketch, right? Nothing's pointing out. We don't see any walls. It doesn't look like a house at all, right? Sorry, but it's not going to look like a house for a little bit longer. But we're going to make some steps. We're going to make the walls. And to do that, I think as Dhruv and Kai mentioned, we're going to extrude the walls. So we're going to use the extrude tool, which is right next to the sketch. And this is the first tool that we talked about that creates a 3D object, right? It basically takes a surface, an area, and just lifts it up and creates a kind of prism shape of it. And so what we want is we have 3 different rectangles, right? We have our center and our 2 side rectangles. We do not want the center rectangle at this point. We only want to extrude our 2 walls, right? So I click the rectangles. Again, I'll undo it. I hover over the area. My mouse is over the rectangular area. The sides are all orange and I click it. That means I've selected it to be extruded. And you can see it's already done a little bit. I can go over the other rectangle. It's orange in perimeter now. And I click it and I've selected both of them. You can see that they're both selected on the left as well. Our extrude window shows that there are face of sketch 1 and face of sketch 1. These are our 2 rectangles. The other options we're gonna leave alone except for depth, right? So the way it looks like right now, it's kind of a short house, right? Houses are usually not this short. So we wanna make this a little bit larger. You can drag the arrow to make it taller. But you can also set the height like a dimension. So this looks reasonable, I'd say. So I'm going to say this is close to 3 inches. So I'm just going to make it exactly 3. I'm going to click 3 into the box and I'm going to hit enter. Once you do that, the sketch will adjust a little bit. And then I'm done with my extrude. I can just hit the check mark. Okay. Once I do, it used to be shaded, but now it's a little bit darker color. And you should see we have 2 walls of our house, right? That's what we have so far. And to see everything's done correctly, these two rectangles, these two walls, they're going to have different colors. And the reason why they have different colors is because they're different parts. You can see all your parts in the left-hand side where my cursor is, near the bottom corner area. And I can hover over of part 1, part 2. I can make them invisible by clicking the eye. But they're two different parts, so they're two different colors. Right? That's what we should have at this point. We should have these two walls. At this point, we're ready to add some windows to our house. But I guess, again, I want to take a pause just because we did a new tool. And I just want to make sure everyone had the extrude okay. Some common problems that you might have with extrude is maybe you extrude too much, right? So here, this is our extrude. I can double click it to change the settings again. A common mistake you might have is you accidentally extrude the center as well. And now it's going to be a solid block. You don't want this, right? If you have something like this, you can always deselect by just clicking on this center rectangle area. And when I click it, it goes away. Other issues would be you just have red text somewhere and it's just not sure. Okay, the colors at this point, it's a good question, but the colors don't really matter at this point. So I think, yeah. I think basically part 1 is by default blue and part 2 is going to be gray. But how they are, what they are don't matter at this point. Okay, so I think we're ready to start moving to drawing windows. So the color on our screen right now, this is not related to like the color of the print. And you can actually change how they look on shape. I think if you right click on your part and do like edit appearance or assign material, you can actually change it to whatever you want. So I think edit appearance, I can change the color to, I don't know, green, right? The color is just for your sake. It's just like, just to make it clear that they're two different parts. But they don't have any effect on how it's printed or any other thing like that. But yeah, okay, no problem. We're gonna move on to adding windows. So I'm gonna reset my view a little bit with this cube. You can click isometric. That's a common good view to look at. And I'm gonna work on this surface. So for me, it's the gray one, but maybe it's blue for you. What I want to do is now draw some windows on that side of the wall. And so this is something that we haven't really talked about yet, but I can create a sketch on any surface I want, right? Any plane I want, I can create a sketch. So before we only created sketches on the coordinate planes, these front, right, and bottom planes, but we can also create a sketch on the plane of our wall, right? So to do that, I want to create a sketch and I can just click the side of the wall. You can see that it's outlined in orange if I'm hovering over it. And I can just click it, right? And you can see that it draws this rectangle on my window, and you can see it's kind of where the side of my wall is, right? And on our sketch window, you can see that the sketch plane is face of extrude 1 because it's one of the faces of the walls. So at this point, I'm going to right click, view normal to sketch plane, so that I'm looking straight at the sketch. So it's a little bit easier to see. And now I want to draw some windows. So if we look at like the model that we're basing off of, you can see this is what the house is supposed to look like at the end. We have a lot of windows here, and we also have a door. We're not going to worry about the door right now. We're just going to draw all our windows on the house. So to start off with, our windows are just rectangles. So I'm going to use the corner rectangle tool and just going to draw a random rectangle. anywhere I want, right? And I'm gonna give it some dimensions, right? Because I want to constrain everything. So I'll say maybe the width of the window is 1/2 inch, so 0.5. And maybe the height of the window is 0.75. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks reasonable. So you can see that it's a little bit taller than it is wide. But again, if you want square windows, feel free to add square windows. If you wanted circle windows, you can use the circle tool and draw a window as well. It really is completely up to you. But once we do this, you can see that the rectangle is still blue. That's because we've defined the size of the rectangle, but we have not defined where it is on our wall, right? I can click this and I can move it around. Right? I can click one of the corners and I can move it around wherever I want. But this isn't good. I need to constrain it somewhere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop it somewhere. I want to define where it is relative to the edges of my wall. And the way to do that is really simple. We can just use the dimension tool. And what's really cool about Onshape, well, just in CAD, is we can use the edge of our extruded surface as like reference points in our sketch, right? So even though like this wall is not really part of my sketch, I can define dimensions relative to it. And what that means is I can use my dimension tool and I can say, okay, I want the top of my window to be maybe, let's see, I can click the top edge of my window and I can click the edge of my wall, right? I do that and I move the number somewhere so I can see. And I'm gonna say, I want this to be, I don't know, 0.5 inches, right? And you can see some of my blue lines have now turned black. I'm gonna do it for the same on the, but just the left edge of my window. So I'm gonna click this edge of my rectangle. And I'm gonna click the left edge of my wall, right? And again, I'm gonna move it somewhere so I can see. And again, I'm gonna make it, let's say 0.5 as well, right? So if everything's done correctly, we can zoom back out a little bit, move it around so we can see the numbers a little bit more clearly, even though it's not clear still. But you can see that we've created a window. We know that the window is 0.5 by 0.75. So 1/2 inch wide, 3/4 of an inch tall. But more than that, we also know that it's 1/2 inch from the top edge of our wall. And it's also 1/2 inch away from the left side of our wall, right? We've completely defined where it is, right? Nothing can be moved because we've defined everything. So right at this point, we have a single window. However, we don't just want one window, we want a lot of them. And at this point, you could draw more rectangles if you want. You can go to your rectangle tool, you can draw another window, you can dimension it and then position it wherever you want. But you can imagine that's gonna be a lot of work, right? This side of the house is probably gonna fit 8 windows at least. You don't wanna draw 8 rectangles yourself. And so we can use kind of a trick. We can use what's called a linear pattern. And that's a new tool that I haven't shown yet, so make sure to pay attention a little bit. On our toolbar, it's kind of near the middle. It's to the left of our dimension tool. It's this like 4 squares. It looks like 4 squares, right? If you hover over it, it says linear pattern. This is the tool that we want, right? What we do is we click the tool and then we click our 4 sides of our window. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you should see a lot of stuff starts popping up on our screen. At this point, you can kind of see that there are, it's a little bit hard to see on this dark gray, but there are like outlines of more rectangles now. Right?
Wait, can you repeat like the linear pattern thing?
Sure, I'm gonna undo this. And this is where, so far we've only have a single rectangle. I'm gonna click the linear pattern tool, which is to the left of our dimension tool. So it's a little bit near the middle, a little bit on the right side. Once I click this, now I need to define what is my pattern that I'm going to repeat. In this case, I want to repeat my rectangle a whole bunch of places. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my edges. And so the way I did it is I just clicked on each of my edges. Another way is you can click and drag and select it like that. Both work. So you can select it like click and drag, or you can just click on each of the edges. But make sure you select all 4 of them. You should see that they're outlined in orange, right? So this is what the rectangle looks like. And if you do that correctly, you should begin to see some outlines of more rectangles at this point. They're just like in this light blue color because they're not set yet, where we have to make some changes. Okay. But hopefully this is what you see at this point. A lot of things popped up in our window, and I will explain what all of them mean. So first of all, just to quickly describe what linear pattern means, a linear pattern is just taking a set of edges, a shape, whatever you want, and creating multiple copies of them, kind of in a grid pattern, right? So there's 2 parameters, well, really 4, but 2 different parameters that we can define. How many of them we want and how far apart are they spaced, right? And so this can be where a little bit of math comes in. So let's look at this setup. To change how many of them there are. By default, there's 3 on one axis. And you can see that by right here. It says 3x on my screen, right? It says 3x. I can click here and say I wanted 5 windows. I can click 5, right? I type 5, I hit enter, and you can see that there's more blue rectangles at this point.
Wait, where do you type the 5?
So on my screen, there should be something that says like 3x by default. If you double click that, you can type whatever you want. So I can hit 2, and now there's 2. By default, it should have looked something like this. You should have, if you see your rectangle that's selected in orange, to the right, you should see this like white square next to the arrow. And the 3x is pointing right at the square, right? So hopefully you can find it.
Okay, yeah, I found it. Thank you.
No problem. So we want, I'm just going to put 5 for now. But you can see that this doesn't look right because my last window is touching the edge of my wall. And if you know anything about houses, that's probably not a good idea, right? You want your last window to be a little bit away from your wall. And so we want to change how far apart they are on our wall, right? The way we define how far apart they are is with here. So right now it says 1, which means each of my rectangles are exactly 1 inch apart. Well, that's not exactly true. It's saying that the corners, the bottom left corner of my rectangle and the bottom left corner of the other rectangle, this is 1 inch apart. But if we know the width of our rectangle is 0.5, so that means that actually the space in between is 0.5. But I can set this to something smaller, like let's say 0.75. Let's see how that looks. You can see that the last rectangle has now moved away from the edge, what we want, but now it's kind of like squished. It's not very evenly spread. And so I actually don't know the correct dimension off of the top of my head, but this is where a little bit of like math can come in, right? So we can actually use a little bit of math to determine exactly what this dimension should be, right? So I'm actually gonna do that. I'm gonna open up Paint just so I can draw a little bit easier. We're gonna use a little bit of math to determine how far apart each of our windows should be. So to do that, we know a couple of things. We know how wide our wall is, or how long it is. So we know that our wall is exactly 5 inches, or at least mine is. It's 5 inches long. And we want to space our windows evenly like this, right? It's a bad drawing because I only have 3 windows. But we know from the edge of my wall to my first window, I want this to be 0.5. That's what I defined. And I know that between the last window and my edge is also going to be 0.5 inches, right? So that means whatever is in between must be 4 inches long. Well, what is in between these two ends? The drawing isn't exactly right because there's actually 5 windows. So I'm going to draw a couple more. But you can see that this 4 inches is defined of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times the length of my window plus 4 of these gaps. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 gaps. I know each of my windows is 1/2 inch long. So I know that 5 of my windows is going to be 2.5 inches, right? Because each of them is 1/2 inch. So I just do some math. 4 minus 2.5. I should have moved my 5 a little bit over, but this is going to be 1.5 inches, right? So my 4 gaps must be equal to 1.5 inches. And so I can just do some division at this point. 1.5 divided by 4. That's going to be how big my gap is, right? This is how big I want the gap between each window. So I'm going to draw it out. I have 2 windows. Each of these is 0.5. And I know the gap between them is now 1.5 divided by 4. So if I go back to Onshape, I can use that knowledge now. So I know that I want the distance between each window to be 1.5 inches divided by 4. However, what is the value that I'm filling in this box? The value I'm filling in this box is how long a window is plus the gap size. So this value should be 0.5 because that's how big a window is, plus 1.5 divided by 4 because that's how big my gap is. And what's cool about Onshape is you can put a value like this. I don't know what this is exactly, but I can just put it there and I can hit enter. And apparently it's 8.875. So I think that's 7/8. And if I zoom out, you can see that my math checked out. You can see that the last window is positioned about where I want it to be. And so this is where like being good at math is helpful in CAD, but it's not necessarily needed. You can just experiment and estimate. At this point, I have 5 windows evenly spaced in the position that I want. But I also want a row of windows beneath it. And so a linear pattern, you can see that there's a 1x here. I can not just do it in one direction, but I can do it in 2 directions. So I can, in the other direction, I want 2 rows. So instead of 1x, I want 2x. And you can see that there's a little bit of problem because it's placing the second row above my rectangle, but really I want it below my rectangle. So to swap it around, I can just click the arrow and it will jump to the other side. So now it's going down instead of
I
up.
can't find the place where it says 2x or 1x.
Okay, so to find it, if you have your rectangle selected in orange and you look up a little bit, you should see like a white square. And you should also see an arrow that's pointing where that square is. And so for me, it's right here about. It might be hidden between all your other dimension symbols. So you can see that sketches get a little bit cluttered. It might be a little bit more clear. If you can find this arrow, it should be kind of above where your rectangle is. If you just click it, and so it's like below at this point, then it's, for me at least, it's away from my other dimensions, so I can access it a little bit easier.
Wait, how did you make the double layer again? I couldn't follow.
Okay, so we are just kind of repeating the same process that we just did. So what we just did is instead of, it was originally 3x and we changed it to 5x. That was in the horizontal direction. And so that was this label right here. However, we want to change it in the vertical position now, right? We're done messing with this horizontal stuff. So there's another arrow on my screen, right? There's another one of these white boxes, and this arrow is pointing to the white box, right? You can see that there's this arrow in white box. You can see that there's this black dimension thing right here, and it's saying 1x. It's saying 1 times, but I don't want 1 times because I want another row. So that's 2 times. So I hit 2, and you can see it starts drawing more rectangles. I'm going to flip it around because I want it down and not up. And I'm not going to be really careful with this dimension. So for me, it's right here. 1 looks a little bit, maybe they're too close together. I'm just going to try 1.25. And that looks reasonable to me. So I'm just going to hit enter.
Wait, where do you click for the 1.25 again?
I think I will just show it on my screen and then I will stop screen sharing and then I can help you find it. Because it will be different for everyone.
Find the place where it says 2x.
Okay, I can also help with that shortly. But if you are done, you can just click out of your, if you just click somewhere else, the linear pattern is done. And you can see that my rectangles have now all been drawn on the screen. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and maybe I will try to help whoever is having trouble with the linear pattern. So I know, Alexander, maybe you can start, and then we'll work our way through. So if you could share your screen, Alex. Cool. Okay, so, oh, I think you already clicked out of it, but, oh wait, that looks good actually. The 1, if you're looking for that, okay, if you move your mouse to the right a little bit more, and then go up a little bit. Up more. Do you see that 1 right above your mouse? Yeah, right there. So you can drag it somewhere so it's more visible, or you can just double click and choose the size. So I think 1.25 looked good to me. And then you can see it moves the row a little bit down. Right? And for all of these, since you can see that a little bit cluttered, you can drag them wherever you want to make it a little bit more visible. Okay, so I'm not sure who else had problem. I guess we can just take a break for now. I will help through everyone who needs it, but if you're good, you can take a little bit of break and we'll resume in, let's say, 10 minutes or so. Because I know 2 hours is kind of a long block of time. Yeah, so I guess right now it's 7:10, so let's try to come back 7:20, let's say. Okay, so whoever had issues next.
Okay, so can I share screen?
Yeah, of course.
So I can't find the place where it says like 1x.
Okay, okay, I'm not sure, but if you hit the 4 squares thing, so if you hover over like, okay, so I think what happened is you kind of ended the linear pattern before doing the second row. And so what we want to do in this case is we're just going to use another linear pattern. So if you zoom out a little bit, just a little bit, you've already selected the tool. So now I want you to click and drag and select all of your rectangles right now. So you might want to start a little bit down more. So you can, go, or yeah, just make sure all of your rectangles are completely selected. Yep. And so now we would want change that 3x to 0 or 1, 1, because we don't want to do any extra in that direction. What we want is to go down. And so if you move your mouse, it's kind of to the top left, up more.
Oh,
Yeah, the 1x. You can change that to 2. And this is the same issue that I had. It's trying to do it above, but we want to do it below. So what you want to do is, do you see that arrow that's pointing upwards?
yeah.
You just want to click it once, or yeah, you can drag it. And you can see that the dimension is now saying 1.16. You can set it to what you want. For me, I guess it's negative, so negative 1.25 works good for me. Yeah, and now you can just click somewhere out and everything should be
Thank you.
awesome. Okay. If anyone else has not sure, has some problems with their sketch, you can message me or start sharing screen. If not, then please. Oh, okay, Josephine.
So I had the same problem as the person who just did that, but I don't know what you just did to help.
Okay.
So
I see also maybe the dimensions of your walls is you chose something different as well. Is that correct?
probably.
Okay. It shouldn't be an issue, but okay. So first of all, there's two things I want to address. So first of all, I'll address the first one, and then I'll talk about doing the second row. Oh wait, also, okay, no. So first of all, if you look at your rectangles right now, they're all in blue. And so we've said so far that blue is kind of not good because it means that it's not defined completely. The reason why they're blue is because you did not define where it is relative to the walls, right? We want to define how far away it is from the top and how far away it is from the side. And so we can just add a dimension to do that. Yep.
So just do that.
And then click the top, yep. And then drag it somewhere where you want, and then click again. And then set it to whatever you want. You can play around with some values.
Whoops.
Okay. Yeah, 1 is apparently a little bit big. Yep, and some of the lines have turned black now, but you have to define the other edge as well.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. And then for the other issue, okay, so if I see that it's not evenly spaced. Doesn't really matter at this point. The way you can fix that is either you can change this dimension or you can change how far apart each of your rectangles are. This, like right now you have it set to 0.25.
Yeah.
You can change it. I showed you how to calculate it, or you can just play around with values to find whatever you want.
Okay.
But let's actually do the second row first. So what we want to do is we want to do another linear pattern. And so first you select the tool.
Yeah.
And then I want you to click and drag over all your boxes. And then let go, and you can see that. So now all those like 1x, 2x have popped up. So where it says 3x, you don't want any more on the horizontal direction. So we're just gonna hit 1, right?
Okay.
We only want 1 copy. But what we do want is more copies on the other direction. And so, I don't see it immediately, but can you scroll out a little bit or zoom out a little bit? Okay, it's all the way up there for some reason. But yeah, you want to hit 2. And then you can click that arrow once and it will jump to the other side. And then you see where it says 1, kind of in the middle, down a little bit, up, yeah,
This
like,
one?
yeah, yep. And so that's how far your 2 rows are. So 0 means that they're,
Hold
yeah, you're gonna have to restart, unfortunately.
Okay.
So yeah, what happened is you hit 0, which means that they're right on top of each other, and so it all just like disappeared. But setting it to something bigger than 0 is gonna make it. So first, you want to change that.
Right.
Well, yeah. You also want to make sure to get that 3x back to 1. But that 1x needs to be 2. Or it looks like you could even fit 3 rows if you'd want.
Okay.
But just, you have to
Here?
make, yeah. Okay, so if you want 3 rows, it's going to be a little bit smaller. But if you want 2, then that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay. Again, whoever's needs help next or would like me to look at your drawing. Again, if not, we have a couple more minutes of break, so please enjoy yourself. Don't want to burn you out with 2 hours of just talking and working. Oh, don't have to raise your hand, but thanks for asking. We'll start again just in a couple seconds in case people are away. Okay, so hope everyone's back and refreshed to start again with CAD. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen again, and here we go. So at this point, I think hopefully everyone has windows on their house. Well, at least rectangles. They're not windows yet, and that's what our next step is going to be. What we want to do is cut out every one of our rectangles from our wall, right? And to do that is pretty easy. We can actually do another extrude. And so that might sound a little bit weird because so far we've only used extrude to create objects, right? But you can also use extrude to remove them, right? And I'll show you how to do that. But first, we're done with our sketch, so we can just hit our check and say we're done, right? Where we don't need to draw anymore. You can see now it's all grayed out, but our rectangles are still there. What I want to do is hit extrude. And this time, I want to extrude all of my rectangles. And I can do that in click and drag. Hopefully that will select them all. But I do not want to, I don't want a window right in the middle because that's where my door is going to be. So I'm going to deselect that. And you can see that it has selected all my windows. You could have also done this by just clicking on all your rectangles just manually as well. That is also perfectly fine. But hopefully all your rectangles are selected except for maybe the center one. What we're going to do is, you can see that they're going out right now, but we want them to go in because we're cutting stuff out instead of like making stuff come out. So I click the arrow to make them go in, right? And what I want to do now is in this extrude option, you can see right now it says solid and add. We want to keep it at solid. You almost always want to keep it at solid for now. But instead of doing add, we want to do remove, right? And so to quickly explain what all of these options are doing, first, new means that each of these parts are going to be new objects. And you can see that they're kind of all different colors. We definitely don't want that right now. Add is saying, okay, I have my existing wall and I want to add these parts to it. And you can see that they're all gray colored. That isn't what we want either because we don't want to add stuff, we want to remove stuff. And that's what the third option is saying. If we click the third option, you can see that all of our windows are now cut out from the wall, right? You can explore a little bit. Just really quickly, the last option, intersect, is basically saying only keep the stuff that's intersecting with my extrude. So the only thing, it's kind of like the opposite of remove. Remove says where it's intersecting, get rid of it. Intersect says where it's intersecting, keep it. Only keep that. So those are just options that you have. We're going to stick with the remove option because we want to cut out all our windows. The other thing to see here, we have a couple more options to change. First of all, we want to cut out the windows on the other side of the wall as well, right? Because we want windows on both sides of our house. And to do that, you can drag so that it's like past the other wall. But you can see that even though we dragged it all the way past the other wall, it's still not cutting yet. And why is it not cutting? Well, that's because we haven't said that the second wall is part of our extrude. To say that the second wall is part of it and should be included, what we want to do is in this, at the bottom of our extrude menu, it says merge scope. Right now, only part 2 is selected. But if I click there and then click this second wall, you can see it adds part 1 to the merge scope, and you can see that it cuts out the window on the other side as well, right?
Wait, can you do that again?
Yep, sure. So I'll just start from the beginning and go a little bit quicker. So this is right here, we finished our sketch. I'm going to reset the perspective. I click my extrude and I want to select all my windows. I can just click on the rectangles that I want. And you can see right now it's kind of trying to extrude, it's trying to add stuff. But we don't want to add stuff, we want to remove stuff. So we click the remove option right here. When we click remove, you can see that it's starting to remove the windows from this side. But we also want to remove the window on the other side. And so you can, first you have to make sure that the depth of the extrusion is past the second wall, right? You have to make sure it's like, it's going deep enough to cut out. But even if it's deep enough, you also have to tell it that this second wall is part of the extrusion, and that's at the bottom of our menu. At the bottom of our menu, it says merge scope. You want to click that box and you can see it turns blue. And then you want to click the wall and you can see part 1 is now included in there. It might be the other way around because I know a lot of you, the first wall was the blue one and the second wall is the gray one. For me, it was the opposite. But once I do that, you can see that the windows are being cut out on either side. Right? And if they aren't showing up, make sure that the second wall is selected in the merge scope, but also check that the depth of the extrusion is deep enough. Because even if it's selected in the merge scope, if the extrusion depth isn't far enough, then it's not going to cut because we haven't removed deep enough. We have to remove past the wall. Right? So something like this looks good for me. And once you have something that looks like this, you can hit check to like confirm your extrusion. And it turns from shaded to more solid looking. And we can, I'm going to reset my view back to normal. And so we can see we have kind of looks a little bit more like a house now, but it's still a bit of ways off. But hopefully we're looking at something like this right now. If anyone still has questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I can also stop sharing. And if you have a question right now, would like for me to look at your sketch, feel free to take the screen sharing. Oh, Peyton?
So is the one, so on your screen, you have the one block that's not cut out. Is that supposed to be for the door?
Yes, yes, exactly. So I purposely did not select the middle one because I want to put a door in there. I guess what we can do is maybe on one of the, I'm only going to put a door on one of the sides. So actually, maybe I can create another extrusion. And then I want to make my sketch visible again. And oops, I want to extrude out this one. But this time, I'm only going to remove it from one of my sides. So this is optional if you'd like. But you can do a second extrusion to cut out the middle window on one of the sides of the walls, but not on the other. You can see that the blue one doesn't have it cut out. But the
Wait, how do you see the sketch again? I can't do it.
So on the left side, if you, for me, it's called sketch 2. It's probably the last sketch that you made. There's this eye thing that you can click on and off. That will hide it or show it. If it's shown, it's going to be this darker color. If it's hidden, it's going to be a lighter grayed out color. And it automatically hides it whenever you do an extrusion based on the sketch, because it's like, oh, you already did an extrusion, you're done. But in this case, we wanted to do more, so we just make it visible again, and then we can work with it. But again, this is optional if you just wanted another window on the side that does not have the door. Okay. But speaking of the door, let's just put that in now, right? So for me, I want to make a sketch on the other side of the house now. It's a little bit annoying to control, but we're kind of seeing that now. So you can, if you're in your like default view, you can use this cube to like turn it around. Oops. Or however you want. For me, it's the back wall. But once I'm looking at the back, I can hit the sketch and I want to create a new sketch on this side of the wall, right? I'm going to click the face and you can see that I have now, you can see sketch 3. It's kind of on the plane of the blue wall now, right? So I'm creating a third sketch. This sketch is going to be for the door. I'm going to make my view normal. So again, I hit the cube back face, but you can also do right click view normal to sketch plane. And here we're going to draw our door. Drawing the door, we're going to do something special just to show off new skills. You could just do another rectangle, nothing wrong with that. But since we want to learn more stuff, I'm going to show you kind of a fancier way of doing this. So we want to do what's called a construction line. And so in CAD, construction lines, construction shapes, construction geometries, they're basically like reference lines. They're not really part of your final object. They don't matter for your final object, but you might want them for like constraining purposes or other purposes. A good example of this is when you're doing revolves, right? Back in the first week, our last class, we made a kind of donut shape. And if you remember, I just drew a random line somewhere, just so that we have a line to revolve around. That line wasn't really special. It wasn't really like anything. It was just saying, here's a random point in my space that I want to revolve around. That's kind of what construction lines are used for, kind of. They're basically just like markers. They don't do much in themselves. They're used alongside other non-construction shapes. So we want to add a construction line, just so that our door is perfectly centered on our rectangle. To do this, I want to hit this construction tool. So right in the middle of my toolbar for me. It's also going to be Q on your keyboard if you like keyboard shortcuts. But if you select this construction tool, it's not really a tool, it's kind of a toggle. So when we click this, we're saying everything that we're drawing now is going to be a construction line. It's going to be a construction shape, right? So I click this saying, I want to be in construction mode now. And then I want to draw my line. So my line tool is L on your keyboard or on your left side, right next to extrude and revolve. It's this line option. So I want to draw a line right in the middle of my wall. And if you notice, we can do this pretty easily because it does it kind of automatically. If I move my mouse kind of towards the middle is right at the origin. So if I move my mouse kind of right below the origin point, you can see that to the right of my cursor, there's kind of a vertical line that pops up, right? Let's say it's not present here, but if I move it to the right, it pops up. There's a vertical line. That means it's a constraint. It does it automatically. Because it's saying, oh, I see that you're starting to create a line at that point. Well, that's roughly vertical with the origin. So you probably want it exactly there. It's like kind of snapping to the right position, right? So I want this constraint. I want it perfectly vertical with the origin. So that's going to be my first point for the line. And then I move somewhere up and you can see it kind of snaps. It snaps to vertical because typically you almost never want a very, very close to vertical line. You almost always want a perfectly vertical line. So it just snaps there for you. But you always have to be careful that you click it when it snaps, because if you don't, then you might have a slightly off vertical. But we want a perfectly vertical line. So when it snaps there, we just click and we're done. We don't want to do another line. So I'm just going to hit the escape button on my keyboard to get rid of the tool. And you can see now we have a construction line. We can see that this is different from other lines because it's dotted, right? It's kind of shaded. It's like not really there. It's just for a reference. It's just so that we know here is the middle of our wall. Once we have this middle line, we want to draw the door. And so to draw the door, we're going to do actually only one side of it because we're later going to mirror it to the other side. So our door, you can do a simple rectangular door. You can use your line. You can go up, vertical, and then horizontal. And you can see I draw two lines like that. You can do a fancier door, maybe, if you'd like. I don't know. Let's see. You could do a line. And then maybe you can do a circle. And then you can see that's like half of what you're going to mirror. This is actually going to be harder, so I wouldn't recommend doing this method. I would just stick with the two lines, the square rectangular door. And that's what I'm going to use starting here. But again, it's blue. I don't want it blue, right? So what I do, I dimension things. So I want to say the height, let's say the height is 1 inch. It's kind of a tall door. And the width, remember, this is only going to be half the width because we're going to mirror it. But I'm going to say the distance from the two vertical lines, I'll say is a quarter of an inch, let's say. So 0.25. So you can see from me, everything's black. If things are not black, that's probably because either you did not click exactly on the edge or your angle is not 90 degrees. It's not constrained. And so if that's the case, you can add constraints, or really, if you don't care and you want a slightly off door, it's up to you. You can make a slanted door if you'd like. Yeah, so we have this half of a door right here. We want to make this a complete door, and so we're going to use a mirror tool. The mirror tool is to the left of linear pattern. So linear pattern was this 4 squares looking thing. The mirror tool is kind of like 2 L's that are facing each other. When we click that, it brings us, it says first select a mirror line. And that's why we created this construction line, because that's going to be our mirror line. We click the line, and then we click the things that the entities to be mirrored. And so here it's the lines that we drew. It's our vertical and horizontal lines. And you can see when I click them, they kind of show up on the other side. And then I click away, I'm done, hit escape, and you can see that the other lines have now been mirrored across the center line. And you can see that these are mirrored. It's actually constrained because now if I modify one side, it's going to modify the other. If I change the height to 0.6, you can see it changes the other side as well. I'm going to change it back to 1. If I change the width on one side to 0.7, it's going to change the other side also to 0.7. So that's an advantage of using the mirror tool. It makes sure that when you change one side, it also changes the other.
Wait, where
Sure.
can
Sure, I can go over the mirror again. So I'm gonna undo my changes, undo my mirror. One more, I think. There we go. So this is where it is before the mirror. We have half of our door and our construction line. Notice our construction line, it's blue, but construction lines, this is where it's like fine to have blue points, blue lines, because it doesn't really matter where it starts and ends. That's not important. But anyways, to do the mirror, the tool is to the left of linear pattern. We have our dimension tool. If you go left 1, 2, 3, we see the mirror tool, and it's kind of the 2 L's. We click the tool, right? And then immediately you see on your screen, it says select a mirror line. This is the line that things are going to be mirrored across, kind of reflected across. And so the line that we want is our construction line. I hover over it and I click it. And then it says select entities to be mirrored, right? I'm done selecting the mirror line. Now I want to select the things I want to mirror. And that's going to be the 2 parts of the doors that I drew, the 2 lines. Once I'm done, I just hit escape and I'm out of that tool now. And I'm free to continue. So at this point, you should have like a black looking rectangle on your wall. Cool. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise, but once we have this rectangle, we can now extrude, right? We can cut out the door now we're done with the sketch. We hit extrude and we're gonna extrude this rectangle. We're gonna remove it and all the options I'm going to keep as default because it doesn't really matter how far I go. And you can see now that the door is cut out, right? I can zoom out a little bit. I can reset my view. Well, the default view is a little bit bad because my door is on the other side, but you can see now we have windows and we have a hole for a door, right? And so I guess, again, I want to pause a little bit before moving on. I think the goal is going to be putting our 2 sidewalls and then a roof to our house for today. So I'm going to move on to the sidewalls. So for the sidewalls, we want to create a new sketch, but the question is, where do we create it? Well, our sidewalls, it's gonna be the plane, the sketch plane is gonna be this kind of edge of our wall, this really flat, thin area, right? Because that's where our sidewall is gonna like connect to our existing walls. So we can create a sketch and we can click one of the sides, right? This really thin area right here. We click this because that's the plane that we want to sketch on, right? And now we can right click, view normal to sketch plane, or use the cube, and we're looking at a side view of our house. You can see it doesn't look very
What do
impressive.
we choose as a plane again?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
What do we choose as a plane again?
Okay, so it's just the side of our wall right here, this kind of thin rectangular area. If you
Okay.
hover over it and see the edge highlighted, you can click it.
Okay.
And so you can see we have a sketch plane kind of at the side of our house. And we can look at it directly on this way. Now we want to draw the side walls, right? So in this case, I'm going to create another construction line. I'm going to click the construction toggle to go into construction mode. I'm going to create a line right in the middle, just like how I did before. I make sure that this is like yellow, constrained perfectly vertical, and make sure it's snapped exactly vertical. And I'm just going to draw a vertical construction line that's vertical. I'm going to draw it a little bit high because you'll see why that's useful later. So you can see we have a construction line. And now I just want to draw the side of our house. If we look back at what we're going to look, how it's going to look, the side of our house is kind of like a square with a triangle on top of it, right? So we're going to draw exactly that. We're not going to draw a triangle, but we're going to draw some slanted lines. But first, we're going to use our line tool, right? So line tool, we're going to mirror again, right? Or actually, maybe it's better if we do a rectangle and not do the mirror. So we're going to do the corner rectangle. And what you want to make sure, this is important, you want to hover over the corner of your house, the outside corner, not the inside, the outside corner. And you can see that it's like surrounded by a yellow box if I'm hovering right over it. If you see that, click it, right? You click it there, and then you drag to your top right corner, the outside corner again, and you can see the yellow box on my screen. When it's like that, you want to click again, right? So we draw a rectangle. If you do that properly, you should see all the lines of your rectangle are going to be black because it's constrained. We did a coincident constraint. That's the circle with that's what the yellow box around the point meant. It meant that the corner of this rectangle has to be at the same location as the corner of my house. Okay, I see Peyton, you have a question. So
we drag it from the bottom left. Where do we like click it off? Like at the inside corner or the outside corner?
okay, so you're always going to do the outside corners. So I'm going to show it again on my screen. We're going to begin with the bottom left. And you can see if I get close, it kind of snaps to that corner. I'm going to click it. And then I don't have my mouse button down, right? I just clicked once and let go. And now I move my mouse to the top right. And then I, again, snap to the corner. And then I click, right? And if you do, you should see a shaded rectangle, and it should be all black lines. Cool. And then now we want to add that like slanted rooftop. So we click the line tool and we use the corners that we created. Make sure you use the outside edge because we don't want the walls to be like slightly too small. But we want to use the outside corner. Click there. Then I'm going to click somewhere on my line. Doesn't matter right now because we're going to add the dimensions later. So I'm just going to click somewhere on my line. Again, it snaps to it. So that's how you know you're doing it correctly. And it should be highlighted in yellow. Yeah, but you click it there. And then we want to click it again on our other corner, our opposite side. And you can see that I've added this triangular shape now. However, it's blue because we haven't defined our dimensions yet. We can define the length of a side. So we can say that this side is, let's say, 2 inches, and it's going to turn like that. But I'm going to do a different dimension, right? I don't want to dimension it like that. I want to make sure that the angle between these lines is 90 degrees, right? So that's a new type of dimension that we haven't really done yet, but I'll show you how that looks now. You want to use your dimension tool, make sure it's selected in blue. You click one line, and then you click the other. So right now it's kind of, you don't want to click outside yet. Right now it's how we would do normally, just the length of the line. But instead of clicking somewhere out, we're going to click on the other line. When we click on the other line, you can see it switches to an angle measurement, right? Instead of a length measurement. We want to do the inside angle, but you could do the outside and just do the opposite. But we're going to do an interior angle. I'm going to click, and I'm going to set this to 90 degrees. And when I do that, you can see it makes everything constrained. Because if we define this inner angle, we also define the length of the side. It's kind of equivalent. If you know one, you can find the other, right? And so that's why when we set this angle, everything now turns black again. Right? And if we take a look on our side, you can see this is what the side of our house is going to look like. We haven't extruded anything yet, but we see our sketch. Right? And that's why we had this construction line, because we wanted to make sure that the point of our roof is exactly in the middle. It would be kind of odd if it was not aligned, right? But anyways, we're done with our sketch, right? So we can hit the check mark and we can start extruding our side. I'm going to hit the extrude button, and then I'm going to hit both the triangle and also the square or the rectangle. If you notice, it's a little bit weird for me. When I hit the square, it looks good on this right side, but on the left side, you can see it's missing a portion, right? You do not want this, right? This is going to be probably going to be similar to you. It might be the other side that's different, right? For me, the right side is fine, but the left side is messed up. It might be the opposite for you. Okay, Audrey, I'll get to you after I do the extrude. But to fix this error, all you have to do is click the rectangle area. You just want to click it and it adds it, and then we see it's a full shape without a corner missing. But before you hit OK, there's two things that we want to do. The first should be familiar. We're just going to change the depth, right? We want to change this. 1 inch is a little bit too thick. We just want it to be the same thickness as the other walls, so it's going to be 0.2. Right? So actually, that's all we're going to change. But if you see the preview, and I'm going to change my window a little bit, you can see that looks good. I don't have any sharp corners anywhere. It's just the square and the triangle. I hit check, and you can see that the side of our house is now there. Okay, so I'll take a pause. I see Audrey, do you want to share your screen now? And hopefully I can
have
take a
two
look.
different devices.
Oh, okay. So then I'll just show again on my sketch. In this sketch, so if we look at it here, I'm going to delete my measurement. So is this what it looks like on your screen right now? Something similar? So I'm going to move it somewhere so it's clearly not 90 right now. We hit our dimension tool. We select it, and it should be blue. We click one of our sides, right? And if we were doing a normal measurement like before, we'd be done. We just click somewhere out and type our value. But you don't want to do that, right? While it's still in this mode, you want to click the other line. So here I already clicked the left line. I want to click the right line. And once I do that, it switches automatically to an angle measurement. And then I hit 90 again, and it's back. So did that help, or is it still not showing up? Okay. Does anyone else have issues? with creating our side wall. Currently, we only have one side.
And then from there, how do I do the extrude thing?
Cool. Okay, so our extrude, I'm gonna deselect everything. So it's gone. Oops. So if you click the check on your sketch, and then you hit the extrude button, the tool, now we want to select all our areas that we're going to extrude on. And so we have the top triangle area, and then we have our bottom square area. But for me, when I do this, it's missing a portion, right? It's not extruding this area, but we also want this. So we're going to select that as well. So for me, I have to click 3 times. Our triangle, our center rectangle square area, and then also the sliver that's missing. It might be on the other side for you. Just be careful. Or maybe it doesn't show up at all. But then the other thing is you want to change the depth to the same as your other walls. So for me, the other wall was 0.2. So I want to make this 0.2 as well. And then I just hit check and I have my wall like that. Okay. And now for the whole reason why we made a center point rectangle at the very beginning in our first sketch. Why did we use a center point rectangle? We use a center point rectangle because now, if you see this right plane, is now exactly at the center of our house, right? That's because our center of our base is the origin. So since this is right at the middle of our house, we can do a trick to do this other wall of our house, right? We could create another sketch. We could draw all our lines again and extrude, or we can do a mirror in 3D space, right? So we saw mirrors in 2D, but now we want to do a mirror in 3D space. So the mirror tool, let me find it right here. It's kind of like the 2 L shapes again, but now it's in 3D. So it's kind of in the middle of your toolbar, right here for me, mirror. I don't think there's a keyboard shortcut this time, unfortunately. But it's kind of 2 L shapes again facing each other. But once you click that, our menu pops up. So first, it's kind of the opposite of 2D. Instead of asking for the line first, it's asking for the parts first. So we want to mirror this wall, right? I'm going to click the wall. And then it's asking for a mirror plane, right? So 3D space, it's not a line, it's a plane. I click the second box and I click the right plane, right? You can see I'm hovering over it right now and it's outlined in orange. So I click the right plane and you can see magically, I'm just gonna hit OK because everything else keep default. Magically, we have another wall to our house, right? That's because we mirrored the wall that we extruded on the other side. And now we have our second wall.
Wait, can you show me how, like, what you clicked for the mirror?
Sure. So I'm gonna Control Z to get rid of that. And I'm gonna start over. So here's what I have. The mirror tool is in the middle of the toolbar. When I click that, a menu pops up. It says mirror 1, and there's 2 things I need to fill out. There's an entities to mirror, and then a mirror plane. So for entities to mirror, this is the thing I want to copy. So what do I want to copy? I want to copy the wall, this blue wall right here. So I click that. However, now I want to move on to the second part of the form, right? I'm done with entities to mirror. So now I click in the area that says mirror plane, the red box. And then I click this plane. So it's a little bit hard to find the right position, but if you hover over it and it's orange, you're good to go.
Okay.
You can click it and it should show up. And then you just click the check mark to confirm and you have your 2 walls. And so we're close to the finish line. I don't think we're gonna finish everything today, but we should be able to put a roof at least. And then that should be like 90% finished. To do our roof, we're gonna do like how it looks in here, we're gonna add a slanted roof on top of the walls, and it's gonna overhang a little bit. But how much is gonna be up to you. But first of all, how are we gonna do this? Well, we're gonna do it. We're gonna create the side profile of the roof. And so we're gonna create a new sketch on the side of the wall that we just created. Right? It doesn't really matter left or right side, but just one of them. So I hit new sketch, and I'm gonna draw the sketch on the side of the wall that I created, right? And then as always, I'm gonna reset my view so I can do right click, view normal to sketch plane, or use the cube to click the surface I wanna look at. But now I'm looking at the side. So what does the roof look like when looking at it on the side? Well, it's gonna be kind of like two slanted rectangles. Oh, okay. That's okay, Alexander. If you think it looks good, it's perfectly fine. So the cool thing about CAD is that you can do things in a lot of different ways. You don't have to do it in exactly one way. If you want to follow along, you could probably undo the extrude, but again, if you like how it looks, it's all up to you. It's design, so you just have a different you have your own unique design, which is cool. But anyways, we want to draw the side profile of our roof, and so we're gonna do a couple lines, right? So I click the line tool, and we want kind of like a upside down V shape. But the bottom of our, or like one of the edges is gonna be exactly the same as our wall edge. So I'm gonna click the top point of our wall, this very top. I'm gonna drag along the same slope. So you can see it kind of snaps again, right? I want it to snap. And it doesn't really matter how far it is at this point. I'm gonna click there. Then I want a vertical part. And again, it doesn't really matter how tall it is. We're gonna make it the correct measurements. I click, I make sure it's snapped to vertical. And then again, I want to make it, I want to bring it, and don't worry about being perpendicular yet, but I want to make sure it's vertical with the point. So again, it should snap to vertical. So when it snaps, click again, and we can kind of repeat the process. So I want to go somewhere like here. And then I want to go down. And actually, it's going to be a little bit odd, but then I want there. So here's like a really rough sketch of my roof, right? It's not perfect, right? But we can make it perfect. So we want to add some constraints to this. First of all, I want to make sure that this portion, this part of the line segment, is parallel with this roof, right? So I'm going to add a constraint. I'm going to click this line. I'm going to click the parallel constraint, and I'm going to click the other line segment. And when I do that, it straightens it out so it's parallel, right? Then I want to do something. I want to make sure that the side, my two sides, outer sides, are going to be equal in length. And so there's conveniently an equal constraint. So I click one of the lines, I go to my constraint menu, and I click the equal constraint. And then I want to make it equal to the other line segment. And I do it like that. Then I just need to add some measurements. So maybe the roof is going to be, let's say, 0.2 in thickness. And the other side is also going to be 0.2. You can see it's a little bit wonky. And okay. I'm going to move it back up there. So it's still a bit wonky because I have to set more measurements. But I can set like this measurement to, I don't know, 3 inches. Let's see how that looks. That's a little bit off. So let's set it to 5. And then I can set this. It's just really setting a lot of measurements. It's whatever you would like to set it. but I want to measure from this corner to there. Oops. And let's see if I can, don't think I can do that easily. Okay, we're just gonna leave it like this. So I set the measurement from the top of my house to the top of the roof as 0.2 and the length of the side as 3. So I see, Peyton, you have a question.
When I did 3, there's like the red things came out when I did the 3 for the length, the roof.
Yeah, so red lines usually means that you're over constrained. So you're kind of too constrained. We're about at the end of time, so I will just show it on my screen and then we will continue off next week because I don't want to go over. But I drew my roof, so I'm just going to extrude it to show you what it looks like. I click it and I want to drag it out to the correct length. And then I hit check and you can see I have a roof on my house now. So again, sorry for time management. I am a little bit behind, so I will have to cut it off about now. But don't worry, we are going to pick off next week where we left off, and we're going to do this roof again. So don't worry about that. But it is 8:02. Sorry for going over a little bit. If you have any questions, I might be able to stick around and answer them if they're quick. But otherwise, that's it for this week, and I'll see you next week. Have a great New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
You too.
Happy
Bye.
New Year's.
I have a
Hi.
question.
Oh, sure.
Like every time I try to delete try to do it the roof your way since I like it better. I just the whole entire sketch gets deleted, so I just have the bottom part of my house. So I don't know how to do your way of the roof. Plus, I was like, when you were talking about how to do the side walls, I was busy fixing my windows because they were just